better. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us. We have quite a few of people registered and more coming into the meeting. So thank you for being with us today. I hope all of you and your loved ones are safe and healthy. These are extraordinary times, and the anxiety and the pressure and the disorientation is just so much to take on and to take in. At Lead San Diego, it's our mission to connect and educate and empower leaders for positive change. And so during this crisis, we want to be true to that mission, and we want to be in service to you. You as leaders of teams, as leaders of families. So we are partnering on this webinar series with experts on organizational effectiveness and inclusion, the team over at Jones, and you're going to be meeting the Jones CEO in a moment. Before we get started, I want to let you know, for those of you who are just joining, that this webinar is being recorded. We're going to email the link after the program for viewing later on, so you can share with your network. My colleague and lead program manager, Kim Nguyen, is our Zoom host at the controls today. She has everyone on mute, as you know, to reduce the background noise. Kim, can you say hi to everybody?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
We also have our CEO, Jerry Sanders, joining us too. Jerry, can you say hi? You might be on mute. All right.
He is on mute. Oh, he just unmuted.
Okay, I'm here now.
We just wanted you to say hi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stephen. We really appreciate you helping us out today in this partnership.
You are very welcome, Jerry. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I would encourage all of you to set your viewing to speaker view so you can access that in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. That way you can better connect with our speakers today. This event is set to show all of the attendees on video, but you can opt out of that function at any time if you like. Just simply select the stop video button at the bottom left of your screen. And please use the chat function to send your questions to Kim, our host. We will try to get to as many as possible. We'll spend about 12 minutes in conversation with each of our two guests, and then take questions from all of you for about 20 minutes. So I'm so pleased to introduce our guests today. They are both thoughtful, bold, compassionate leaders, and I admire them both very much. Cindy Marten is at the forefront of the huge changes we are experiencing right now. She is Superintendent of San Diego Unified School District, which counts 181 schools and 103,000 students in its district. And San Diego Unified is one of the largest employers in the region. She has 25 years of experience as an educator, including teaching elementary grades as a classroom teacher, and then later on serving as a school-wide literacy specialist in the Poway Unified School District. Ms. Marten is now leading the shift to distance learning for the families of all of those 103,000 children, and all of the teachers who are now having to reinvent themselves and their teaching in their classrooms on virtual platforms like this one. Welcome, Cindy Marten.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you here.
Nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Stephen Jones, our second guest, is an author, national speaker, and the Chief Executive Officer of Jones, our partner. Jones is a firm that specializes in providing inclusion and organizational effectiveness consulting services that supports leaders in achieving high performance by leveraging diversity. Dr. Jones and his team of consultants advise such well-known brands and organizations like Honda, the Getty, Kodak, Qualcomm, and Verizon. He's also a member of the Lead San Diego Board of Directors. Welcome to Stephen Jones.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to be here. And hi, Cindy. How are you?
I'm well. Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Thank you both so much for being with us today. We're going to get started with Dr. Jones. It seems since this has started that each week has felt so different. Yeah. With the beginning being kind of in crisis mode, filled with confusion and overwhelm and just people getting used to it. And there was a lot of fear too, I think. Yeah. And then we kind of settled into more of a cadence. Mm-hmm. How would you describe the time that we're in right now for leaders and their teams.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think the idea of culture shift, culture change, and culture transformation, right, is what we're experiencing on so many different levels. If you think about it, so much of the structure in our culture has been provided for us. You work 5 days, you have spend 2 days at home with your family and loved ones and pets. You go to 9 to 5, or some people work 7 days a week, right? And so the structure has been pretty much just kind of blown up in terms of what is our normal, which is why I appreciate this concept of we are creating a new normal. And that takes energy, right? So figuring out like, when do I work? When do I stop working? What does work mean? How do I keep myself and my family and my parents and grandparents safe? All of those things we are having to recreate now, right? And that takes energy. Someone also told me that the idea of kind of interacting in a Zoom or virtual environment actually takes more energy to connect. So at the end of days, people are, exhausted if they're, holding a lot of virtual meetings, as well as working 24/7 to take educational institutions, corporations, nonprofits, small and large businesses into a virtual platform. So all of that takes energy. And I think in this next phase, we're starting to see structure being created. And that's creating a level of that cadence and calmness. But it's also really incorporating a level of grief and loss. And that takes energy, right? Because people are losing jobs, not based on performance, but based on things outside of their control, right? And for many people, their work is connected to their identity. Their family is connected to their identity. So the distance and the challenge is, how do we keep connection and not let distance create a division?
So how do you keep that connection, and that connection to each other and connection to purpose and to mission?
Yeah.
When you're trying to recreate these structures, how do you keep that connection as a leader?
We say there are 3 C's that are important during this time, whether it's with families, leading teams, with friends. Those 3 C's are connection, communication, and caring. Right. And so many people are holding, virtual happy hours where they hang out with their friends, or, just going to each other's, stepping outside of their house and staying on individual driveways as people talk with each other. We see cities and across the world, people stepping outside of their window and yodeling and clapping, and that gives us a sense of being connected to each other. So that feeling and experience of connection, we say to leaders, do not do business as usual in this virtual reality. Start off your meetings giving an opportunity for people to say how they're being impacted by COVID-19, or one thing that's impacting them that's important for others to know as they participate in these meetings, right? And so that connection becomes important. The communication becomes important in terms of planning, priorities, and expectations, right? So with our teams, we need to plan what the next week needs to look like. What are the priorities for today? And then what are the expectations of our team members? So we're hearing about paid medical leave. We're hearing about, if you have a child or a loved one that you're taking care of, a, elderly parent or someone who's been, impacted or infected by the virus. And so communicating those expectations of how we're going to take care of each other becomes important. And then the third C, the caring, is really about communicating just that we care, right? We were talking with a client where both of the parents were medical professionals on the front line. And they talked about how their middle school son had gotten a negative mark because he showed up late to log into one of his classes. He had been taking care of his two siblings, and his 4-year-old sister had a hard time getting her to have breakfast that morning, right? The parents were saying that, they were really concerned because the teacher didn't demonstrate a level of understanding, right, around what was going on in their household. While many of them would consider both of them, in that household privileged, in this COVID-19 environment, there was a different reality, right? And so really letting people know that we care about them. We say to leaders, reach out individually to your team members, whether it's randomly or, each team member, if you're able to do that based on the number, just to kind of say how you're doing, right? We've got to lead in a different way. And I think 3 C's can help us.
Yeah, it's really listening for those things too, right? The things that they have going on, the things that are impacting their work, the things that are going to be impacting their outlook.
Exactly.
We're lucky to work for Jerry, and he called each of us right away. Personal connection means so much.
Exactly.
As we adjust to this new normal, how do we make that shift from being in crisis and being in reaction mode to being maybe taking on a more a creative mindset, or a mindset of okay, what can I do with this new reality? How do you make that shift, or are we ready for that shift?
It's so good, because I think there's a graphic that's going around on Facebook that talks about going from your comfort zone to a growth zone, right? And I think the first part is to look at it, and the process is oftentimes there's a fear zone, which is right outside of your comfort zone. Then there's a learning zone, and then there's a growth zone, right? And so that idea of fear being I'm stuck at home, right? Learning being I'm safe at home.
Okay.
Right. And so really paying attention to our mindset, our language, and moving from crisis. It's you give me lemons, I make lemonade, right? The message that we're all in this together, that we're going to figure this out together, that we can, and this is the time for people to say, what's a new book I want to read? What's a new, and let me say, when I think about this, I think about those people who are having their basic needs met, who are really saying, how do I get to that learning and growth zone? I think there are other people who are underserved or are impacted, who are struggling with, how do I get my daily needs met? And I want to make sure that, the idea of, I saw there was a link that said in Southwestern College and in the Bay Area, there was a drive-in pickup food, and so we've got to support our community in getting our needs met so that everyone can move into that learning and growth zone together. And we know we have a homeless population that we really need to, as a community, take care of as well. So the idea of what can I learn, who can I help, and how can I provide agency and move from a place of feeling empowered, right, to make change and to manage, our reality together, is part of how we move from that reactive crisis to that empowered learning and growth.
What is one thing, Dr. Jones, that leaders can put into practice with their teams today or tomorrow to start kind of shifting things and make that connection with their teams?
Yeah, I think the key is listening, and listening to understand how people are being impacted, the tools that people need in order to kind of be effective, to show up at meetings, to move things forward, to listen to individuals and teams. Somebody told me once, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them proportionately. Now's the time to listen at least twice as much as we are talking, where we are in leadership roles. And to me, that includes leading our families, right? So listening to our kids, listening to, everyone and each other and ourselves, right? Because I think a friend of mine was telling me that she decided she was going to have dinner in her car. Right? Because she said she listened to herself and she was like, I just had enough and I needed my own space so that I could be able to be there for others. So self-care and caring for others is a key part of that listening.
Those are great tips. Thank you, Dr. Jones. And that gives us just a natural transition to Cindy Marten, talking about, leading families and looking after our little ones and others who depend on us. But before we get into our focus on leading families, I'd love to talk about your decision to close the district before the governor's order and before any other school districts in the county. And that was just such courageous leadership and a really smart move. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you. I appreciate Dr. Jones just saying we don't just jump right in on a meeting. And that's about what I'm doing right now is just jump right in. But I do want to say to everybody, I know you're home, you have kids, little ones, and you're trying to figure out where did the little ones go when I'm trying to be on a Zoom call. And we are starting every meeting with checking in with one another, what's going on, add 20 minutes to a meeting if you need to, because some people are going to bring you something. And as leaders, if they bring you something, you got to be ready to receive it. And you have to be ready to be present and open and listening and a lot of empathy and understanding. And we can't pretend to know what everybody's going through. And even if we knew somebody before, their whole situation may have changed. So now I'll answer your question, but I appreciate that is a frame. And as leaders, that's a really important frame. You are right. Thanks for asking the question that San Diego Unified did make a decision before any other district and really before we started seeing any of the closures up and down the state or any of the other local or state level or national level orders. And what I was looking at was I was seeing our city and the city that I love. Our whole initiative in San Diego Unified has been about our hashtag is Better SD. How do we make San Diego a better place? And schools are part of making this city great. And what I was seeing was this crisis was getting worse. And it was clear to me day by day, the closer and closer it got, that it was irresponsible basically for us to stay open. It seemed like it was getting more and more irresponsible for us to stay open with 105,000 families and children and their families. And when I saw what was happening, I thought, it's time to make a decision. And I was asking for guidance. I asked for guidance from state leaders, city leaders, health professionals, finding out what's the guidance here, because it didn't seem right that we would stay open. And we weren't getting clear answers. People weren't sure. They didn't know. There was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of concern and worry about what's the right thing to do. And as leaders, we have to make tough decisions, and sometimes without guidance. Sometimes we're not getting the guidance we need. And so at that time, in that moment of decision that we all face as leaders, I know they could have, the different leaders, they could have ordered us to close. They could have said, okay, statewide order to close, or city order that all schools are going to close. And they had the power to do that, but they didn't want to. They didn't want to do a statewide order. They didn't want to do a local city order. Even though we're asking, they gave some guidance, some things to think about, but the guidance really wasn't clear. There wasn't a definitive, thou shalt or thou shalt not do that. And so that's a leadership lesson, that for us as leaders, sometimes the road ahead of us isn't clear and we don't know and we're not getting clarity. So one of the things I did is I called Los Angeles Unified, my colleague up there is superintendent in LA. We had a conversation about what he was experiencing in LA. LA is 10 times the size of San Diego. And he and I thought through this together, and we decided that we were going to jointly announce the two largest districts in the state of California. We're going to announce the next morning, which was on March 13th, that we were going to simultaneously announce the closure of both of our school systems. And that's one of those things like hold hands and jump. We're going to take a leap and do it before there was an order to do so, or before there was clear guidance on whether it was what to do. And I just think that that's what happens as leaders. Yeah. We might not get the experts telling you what to do because they might not even know. And at the end of the day, as a leader, you have to make the call. We made the call. We believe it was the right thing to do. And we got out there and we did it. And that's really a leadership lesson, whether it's COVID-19 or any other crisis. leaders are faced every day with making a call, and you've got to bring in lots of different points of view and interests and scientific information and everything that you can look at, but make the best decision for the constituents that you serve and for the mission that's your mission. And I'm clear on our mission as a public school system. LA Unified was clear. And we knew that in order for us to make the contribution of slowing the spread, all the things that everyone's talking about now, on March 13th, people have a lot more knowledge now than there was then, but it was starting to emerge.
Right. As we are shifting, and San Diego Unified has just started kind of ramping up to the end of the month when it's going to be full throttle, right? So as we are shifting to distance learning, what should parents be focused on right now? Like, what do our children need most from us?
That's so important, because the world seemed turned upside down for the kids. School is such a place of comfort for them, and there's routines and there's schedules and there's things that they can count on. And that was back to the leadership decisions. When we made this decision, I knew two things were important. How are we going to be able to, as a school system, provide the two things our children and our community counts on us most to do? Many of our families are dependent upon school for their nutrition. And so I knew we need to figure out a continuity of providing food and nutrition services to our kids from minute one of the closure. We started on a Friday announcing the closure, and starting Monday morning, how do we do that? That's this idea of what type of, that's comforting to some families. What Dr. Jones just said, if basic needs aren't even met, you can't talk about, wow, I think I'm going to read a book during this time. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to get food on my table. And we have many low-income families that have turned into no-income families during this crisis. And so they're at the hierarchy of need, they're at basic need right now. So the school district, our role was number one, and I say number one and number two, but I don't mean them in order because they're equally important, was continuity for food and nutrition services, and then continuity for learning. So learning is our core mission. How do we make sure we're giving support for kids and families to be able to continue their learning during the closure? And so right away from the very beginning, we made a partnership with PBS Learning to make sure that there were television programs on from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We knew everyone had a TV. So day one, there was a schedule that you could log into and you could get some content there. And then I also asked our educators, we put up 10 days worth of lessons for the first 10 days of our closure, that there had to be something that families could look to that were created by educators, that were aligned to the kinds of standards that we know are important for teaching, and we put up those 10 days of lessons. Now what you're talking about is this sort of soft launch that we're in right now. Those 10 days took us up to what our spring break was going to be, and all of these are leadership decisions. That this can't change who we are. It doesn't change what we need to do and why we need to do it, but it changes how we do it. How we're teaching and feeding children, and the details around it are changing significantly. But the core mission is the core mission, and that is so important in leadership. We don't change our mission. So we went through up to our spring break with those 10 lessons and the PBS Learning through public broadcasting. And then starting this past Monday is when we would have been returning to our regular classrooms from spring break. We knew that that wasn't going to be happening. People want to know, when are we opening? Those answers are things that we don't know, but what we do know is how to have a continuity of learning. So we also announced early on that starting April 6th, which was this past Monday, we would have our soft launch into distance learning. And that what that would look like between April 6th and April 24th, we wanted to make sure there was going to be this learning. We're not just throwing this year away. Learning matters, and we have kind of two legs that we can stand on right now as a district for us to be able to make this transition. First of all, we have in all of our classrooms, our students have computers. This was not something that there was a COVID-19 crisis and we had to quickly scramble and figure out how to find computers and devices. Our children have been learning with computers in their classrooms for 10 years. We started an initiative called I-21, passed successful bond measures, and have invested in the infrastructure that's required to actually use digital learning tools in the classroom. Now we're in our operation now where we've pulled the computers out of the classrooms. We're sending them home. We have 7 distribution centers. This is a military town, so logistics are what we do best in San Diego. So you can imagine, those of you on this call that are into logistics, just imagine 105,000 computers are securely locked into charging carts around 5,000 classrooms across the district. We have to pull those charging carts out, remove the computers, clean them, make sure they're ready to go, and then put them to distribution centers and make sure our kids have those. So that's kind of a fun call for people. People want to get into the logistics of how that's all happening at this point. But this is what's happening now is we're getting that learning going, and we're returning to full graded instruction on April 27th, which is important from the very beginning. We're hearing from our seniors, especially, am I going to graduate? Is this year going to count? We want to know this year does count. Learning does matter. Every minute does matter, and we're going to move forward with that happening. And so that kind of thing is happening as we go, and we're providing that learning from the minute we close, but we're continuing to change and ramp up. And I got to say, there's more love than I've ever seen for teachers before. The parents are home right now going, wow, this is really hard. And I was a teacher for 17 years. I taught kindergarten. My son is 25 now, so I know what it's like to have kids at home and to be a teacher, and parents are understanding you talked about some of the jokes that are out there now on the internet, the jokes about, wow, this is a super hard job, but we're here to support. And we want to show how much learning does matter and how we're going to transition to this online platform, and our teachers are getting trained, and we are able to enter into this moment in time that none of us wanted to be in. And when I think about our kids looking around the city, so much is closed. The parks are closed. The libraries are closed. The churches and the temples are closed. Places of work, everything is closed except the hospitals and the grocery stores. And it looks like our schools are closed because when you drive by, they're closed. But what we're saying is the physical building is closed, but our minds are open and learning can continue. It just looks different. And we say in San Diego Unified, we've been equipped to do this in our mindsets about how we teach children. We have to teach children that come from very diverse backgrounds and understanding we always say you can't teach them if you can't reach them. And that's in the classroom. In the classroom, we're always differentiating instruction, knowing that students come in with all kinds of needs and we have to meet them where they are at their point of need. And so besides us being ready because of the technology standpoint, we're ready because this district has defined our identity, it's in our DNA to serve children from various backgrounds and lots of diversity. We always say your demography doesn't determine your destiny. And we always say we want to teach children and meet them where they are. And we say we define equity by each and every student gets what he or she needs, when they need it, in the way that they need it, and what our children need right now and what our parents need right now is very different than what they needed on March 1st. From March 1st to April 1st, we're in a whole new world, but we didn't change who we are. And it's the professionalism of the educators. And we're here for the families, and we're here to provide supports for you.
Thank you. As a parent of 3 in the district, I appreciate that so much. I have a high schooler and first grade twin boys, and so it's been an adjustment. And so my next question is about that overwhelm for parents who are trying to meet the demands of their job. And I mean, can we talk screen time? Like how much screen, that seems to be the burning question, right? Like parents feeling guilty about the amount of time their kids are spending watching TV or on their iPads. How much do we need to worry about that right now? Cindy, tell us.
Let's take guilt away, because people are feeling so guilty. They're trying to be perfect at this. Nobody's perfect at anything right now in the entire country. So I keep saying, please be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with your children. Be gentle with the educators that are trying to learn a new tool and figure it out. And we have made a commitment to be here for one another. San Diego is going to be we always say better San Diego. What are we doing as San Diegans to come together and support each other? But I got to take away that guilt as a parent. I hear what you're saying and you're worried, like, am I doing it right? And you're not going to mess up. Be present. Be available. Go to the car and have dinner if you need to have dinner. Dr. Jones, I heard what you said. There's not a perfect answer for how to do this. And there are parents that are thinking, okay, online school is starting, so now we get to just do 6.5 hours a day on the computer with the teacher. Well, by the way, that's not how we teach anyway in the classroom. There's no stand and deliver teacher on stage on the stage. The way we teach isn't that way, so why would we change that now? we want to be able to connect to our students, give them meaningful, purposeful work to do, and have that happen in the context of each family being very different. And so structures and routines, and, do you have a little desk that you set up for them and you say no TV during this time and TV during this time, but only educational program? These are all individual family decisions, but I keep saying to please be gentle with yourselves. We're providing resources. We've got a great to-do list. I think we can link it here about like parents back at it's on our website. Andrew's just letting me know, but we can link it too. There's a checklist for parents. We don't want to get into a right and wrong and have people feel like, oh God, I'm messing up if I don't follow this exact checklist. Don't do that to yourselves. But another thing I also am saying to our families is what becomes the routine for your family is defining your family for a long time. And I don't mean to make pressure on that. I'm saying that is what can create a time for precious moments for your family right now. That if you can step away for a moment and just sort of look at this situation, when your little children now are senior citizens, their children and their grandchildren are going to be asking, what did your family do during that COVID-19 crisis, or whatever they end up deciding to call it? But one of the most important things that you can do right now as a family is to record this time. And there are lots of tools to record. I have examples of families that have kept a journal. Low key, don't put big pressure on yourself, but do a journal of every day, what you've done and what your family has done. And there's online journaling apps. I use one called Day One that lets you do multimedia. So every day I've been journaling. I make time to journal and to write about what's happening, what I'm doing, how I spent this time, because this time will end and we'll look back on it. And I believe that we can be changed for the better depending on how we choose to spend this time with one another. We've provided apps like Audible has the best books for children right now that are free. YouTube has the best. These are all on our site, like top 10 things that you can try and the things that the teachers are providing you too. But if you're struggling, check in with the teachers now. Our teachers are actually connecting with their kids. Our principals are connecting with the families. And we're here. We got you. And we're going to help you through this. We're going to help each other through this. And just really, really be gentle with each other. My son's 25 and my mother's 82. And I have a brother who is developmentally disabled. All three are in very different situations. But I have had to make specific time to make sure I FaceTime with my mom every day. My developmentally disabled brother can't use devices like that, but we figured out how to get him on Zoom so I can see him every day. And my son and I, even though he's 25, we do story time every day. Every night I have 15 minutes. We're listening to a book together on tape. It's a great book, by the way, if you haven't read it. It's called Overstory. Phenomenal, really long. This is the time to do it. But in my day, I'm 6 a.m. till I'll just go 24/7 with the work I'm doing right now. But I make time to connect with my mom, connect with my brother, and then I have my story time with my son. He probably doesn't want me telling people. I was like, Mom, I'm a grown-up. You don't have to say story time. But we're connecting, and we're finding ways to connect. And I only tell you what am I doing in my individual situation, but make up these routines. And whatever routine you made up for week 1 with your children at home, know that routine week 2 won't work anymore. Week 2, you're going to try. So I have a meeting on Sunday night with the family and say, so how did last week go? We thought everybody goes in full speed ahead, like you're going to have your desk here and you're going to do your thing here. And everybody had like this perfect plan and it totally fell apart after the first week. And say that. Okay, well, that didn't work. How did last week go? And what do we want to do this week? And make it into a family meeting and a family conversation. And the schedules are going to change as the moms and dads start to understand what their lives are going to be like. And you look at your week and say, well, I have 17 Zoom meetings that I can't be interrupted. So mommy's going to be over here. I'm sure this is what you're doing right now, Elizabeth. This was on your schedule, that you're not with the twins right now because you had this on your schedule, but plan for that. The family has to plan for what they're experiencing.
Those are such great tips, Cindy. Thank you so much. I feel armed and ready to handle the next few days.
You got this. You got this.
I'm actually going to turn it over to Kim to ask one of our questions because I have to go deal with my dog who's going crazy. So I'll be right back.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I've got one question from Hilda over at Takeda for Cindy Marten. Her question is, what do you say to parents who have juniors in high school who are concerned about college applications, SATs, and the chances for good school admission because of this disruption? She saw the UC announcement regarding SAT waiving, but this is still anxiety inducing for a lot of students and parents. And to follow up, how is San Diego Unified working with colleges at this time to ensure those smooth transitions?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. People have been asking that since day one, and I want to refer to everybody the FAQ on our website. We have that specific question. So lots of the questions that are coming in, there's some trends and patterns, and there's some really unique individual questions. We answer them all as they come in, but the ones that have bubbled up as big questions, we're providing on the FAQ website. So we can make sure you guys have links to that. But let me answer it, right now. That's a question the whole country's asking. The college admissions, how's this going to affect my admissions? What's going to happen? And there have been now, the governor did decide to cancel state testing and the SATs and the ACTs and some of the things that, what's going to happen to all of that. Now all the guidance is coming out on, not just guidance, final decisions are coming out on that. So we're able to actually navigate that with each other as a community because everybody's asking the same question. The message to your 11th grader is keep on learning. We didn't throw this year away. This year really does still matter. And we want to make sure that you're able to do what you can. The FAQ on the website really goes into details. It's the University of California and the Cal State University system. They've already decided, and this was lots of back and forth with the state superintendent and the governor and Linda Darling-Hammond, the chair of the State Board of Education. They all got together from the beginning and worked on this, and California State and University of California are relaxing some of those admission requirements they have. So students that are applying to UC schools for the fall of 2020-21, they're not going to have a standardized entrance exam. And then UC and Cal State schools are also suspending any letter grades for students that are taking classes to get into college during the school closure. So I'm reading it from the FAQ page. You can find it yourself, but this has been thought of at the state level, and state leaders have worked with the universities because we don't want to have this COVID-19, which is not any of our children's fault, impact them negatively in their education. And so if there's something that's going to cause a student to get off track and not be able to follow the path that they had, and we can change it through a waiver or through a relaxation of some of the requirements, where all the institutions are working together to make sure that happens.
Good. And I appreciate that. If I can just build real quick on that, Cindy, I so appreciate your statement earlier about the mission stays consistent. And then the how of achieving the mission, the commitment to students stays consistent. We're working with a number of community colleges and universities. And to your point, everybody's figuring it out, right? Maintaining the consistent commitment and mission and dedication to students at all levels, from K through PhD, right? And that structure and that guidance will come in waves and in phases.
We don't change our mission. We don't change who we are, and we don't change our mission, but we change our tactics, and we change. That's about being flexible and doing that with skill, wisdom, and grace, not just a hard pivot because, okay, something new, let's go.
Right.
You can't be a driver on it, like just do it because we got to do it. It's got to be done with compassion, empathy, wisdom, skill, grace, patience with one another, flexibility. But there is a pivot, and the pivot does need to happen, but it's the human side of that pivot.
Exactly.
Cindy, we have a request that you repeat the details about the letter grades, and then we have a question for Dr. Jones.
Repeat the details about the letter grades. I'm trying to think what I said about that. So we're returning to graded instruction, and our students are going to begin that. This is the soft launch period that we're in right now, and then on 27th is when we return to the graded instruction. But we did say that we put a marker in on the 13th when we did close, saying that students' grades aren't going down. And the reason we said that, to make sure that's clear, is it doesn't mean don't keep working. We want to keep working. What we talked about was for students who can't get connected to learning. We have families that may have left. They may have gone to Mexico to be with family. We don't want a student to be harmed because to no fault of their own or our own, not that we haven't tried to reach them, not that they didn't want to be taught, but that it just didn't work, this learning condition. Maybe they had family members that died and they're in crisis. I mean, families are in major crisis right now. So we didn't want a student to somehow get an F in a class, when they were getting an A, and then the crisis hit, and mom and dad are healthcare workers, and the kids had to go be with grandparents someplace else and couldn't access. Why would you punish a child academically for something that is totally not their fault? That's what we meant about the grading and the hold harmless policy around that grading is, let's not harm our kids' grades because of something out of their control. That doesn't mean don't work. That doesn't mean, oh, well, summer vacation until we start again. No, keep on working. The kids that do the work that you can do, but if you can't work, and there's real reasons that we understand with empathy, we're here to understand that.
Great, thank you. Question for Dr. Jones. This is from Carissa Wisniewski, a member of our extended lead family, former board chair. Dr. Jones, what do you see as indicators that will trigger the business community getting back to work, given there are not normal scheduled breaks to gauge off of?
Yeah, I think that, well, I think the first part is, prior to this entire pandemic, there was a lot of questions, especially across generational differences, about work being something you do versus work being a place that you go to, right? And we saw many organizations that resisted this idea of working from home and the thought was working from home would reduce productivity. Right. Well, now many of us are working from home and figuring out how to continue that level of productivity and what level of productivity to set. So I think one part, again, I'll parallel what you said, Cindy, around learning doesn't stop, right? Working doesn't stop. And so, I think the work continues. And then in my mind, I think it's going to be a phased approach where safety comes first, individual and public safety, and really listening to the scientists and the public health officials who are telling us, when it is safe and what safety looks like. And then many leaders of companies are really listening to hear what are they continuing to learn about COVID-19. Right, and the impact of the virus and how it spreads and how it morphs and, so on and so forth. So I think the public health officials communicating to us and doctors, right, what does safety look like? And then leaders coming back and saying, so here's what the first phase of transitioning back to in-person working, right, or in office working versus which aspects of the business can and will stay virtual longer, right? And so I think there's going to be a need for a lot of communication, even if tomorrow there was okay, we're now all clear to start back up again and come into the office. I think there would still be some phases, although let me be clear that that's not the case, right? And so I think the other part for me is a skill that I think is important in the 21st century is the skill of comfort with ambiguity and getting comfortable with the unknown. And I think that's part of what is causing, for many people, a lot of stress. And I think that idea of creating those routines that Cindy talked about, both within your family and also within your work environment, I think is also very, very important. So that communication, to hear the game plan that companies are putting into practice will be very important.
We have another question for Cindy. If you could talk, please, about how the district is supporting children and families with special needs as they're transitioning to remote learning.
Yes, thank you for asking that. I just talked about my own brother, Charlie, and what we're having to do as a family to support him, although he's an adult, is developmental disability. He's mental age is 4 or 5 years old. And so I'm front and center in my own family, making sure that the supports that usually work for him are not working for him right now. And we've had to retool. So I'm very sensitive about what that looks like. And when I said earlier, we don't change who we are, our ability to serve our students with disabilities, our English learners. We have 6,000 students in San Diego Unified who are experiencing homelessness. Those are on any given day. That's the demographics of our district. And so when we work towards our distance learning plans, again, this is on the FAQ page, and there's a resource specifically for students with disabilities. What I meant what I said before. We can't teach them if we can't reach them. And reaching a student with disabilities who needs lots of different supports and modifications and accommodations to learn in a brick and mortar classroom, the kinds of accommodations and modifications they needed in a brick and mortar classroom might be different than the ones they're going to need at home to be able to learn. So it's the case provider and the teachers and all of the extra support providers, that occupational therapists, speech therapists, the people that understand what a student's specific disability or need might be, will work with each family to design what will learning look like at home. It's different. No, we can't pretend it's going to be the same, but it's individualized. That's what an IEP means. It's an individualized education plan. And the plans that we wrote in all the IEPs that are active currently, those plans being implemented in a different setting may need to change, but what doesn't change is understanding how to meet students' needs. So we design lessons where, same that we do in a classroom, we could have a teacher doing a whole class lesson with everybody participating, and you have 3 students possibly with a disability, and paraprofessional is ready to work with the smaller group and small group instruction to do reteaching. We might need students that need different assistive technology. They may need headphones to be able to learn, or they may need devices that allow them to access the content differently when they're trying to access it from home. So there's overall guidelines that we've provided on our general plans for students with disabilities, and then the specificity is each and every student, like I said, what they need, when they need it, in the way that they need it, and work with each family. And the family has to tell us what's currently happening right now with them, what's challenging for them right now, and how can we help you with that. And some of our families are telling us, we didn't know how much you were doing. And they're part of the IEP. They usually know, they read the IEPs, but until they're having to deliver the educational context, we're here for them, and we're here to figure that out together. Thank you for asking that. It's near and dear to my heart.
Thank you, Cindy. And just to let everyone know that the FAQs that Cindy has mentioned are now in your chat string, so you can access those now. Going back to what you were saying earlier, Dr. Jones, about the sort of the loss of structure. And, we had a set time to go to work. We had a set time to go to school, and then there were the weekends, and now it's all just kind of, bleeding together, right? How, as a leader, and in being sensitive to your team's needs and their schedules and demands at home, how do you kind of create some structure, and how do you kind of create kind of a difference between, the weekdays and the weekend? I mean, Can you give us some thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think the first thing I would say about creating the new structure is balance and pacing becomes really important. We were talking to a client recently and said to them, not every meeting needs to be a Zoom meeting. Right? And so we can still have audio only meetings, and that creates, again, a level of a different relief. Yes, right. And the other day I had an audio only call, and I was like, why are we not using Zoom? This seems antiquated, right? And so I think, similar to, again, I'll connect back to your point, Cindy, about the idea of the sage on the stage is outdated, right? The idea of having meetings for the sake of having meetings is something that we've needed to look at for a very long time, right? Pre-pandemic. And so the idea of really communicating what the purpose of meetings are, what are the goals and outcomes of those meetings, and then, again, planning ahead. I'll parallel, again, your point, Cindy, of, every Sunday, look at for the family, what's our game plan for this week? I think that's part of how leaders have to lead with their teams. What's our game plan for this week? So that we're creating the structure together in order to move forward. We're also creating a document called 7 Tips for Leading an Inclusive Virtual Meeting. And so I think that idea of a commitment to recognizing conscious and unconscious bias as it shows up in this virtual realm is another part of creating that safety, if you will, which structure oftentimes brings. Then the other part is to really encourage teams and employees to find a stopping point, right, where they step away from the work and really focus in on something else. Whether it's a pet, whether it's a FaceTime conversation, whether it's just being alone and, reading or whatever they're doing. But the idea of creating, yes, eating in your car, boundaries is what's really important. And that applies then to the weekends as well. Last Monday, I was like, why does it feel like Wednesday, right? Because it's daylight. And so this idea of really, we get to create a new structure for ourselves, our families, our loved ones, and others. And I think that's really important. I want to just mention one thing before our time is up, Elizabeth, with it, which is I want to acknowledge that unfortunately for many people, home does not equal safety. If there is violence in the home, if there's abuse in the home, whether physical or emotional, for, people living in the home, whether it's kids or adults. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that there's that dynamic and aspect of many people's reality that I think is important to include in our conversation. And so we also hope that people are creating safety and are able to be safe in the spaces that they are living together today.
Yeah, very well put. Well said, Dr. Jones. Cindy, anything you'd like to add on that point? I know many of your teachers have children of their own, and they're trying to create structures with their classrooms and with their little ones at home.
Yes. We have a daily call, obviously, up putting this whole thing into operation. And some of the feedback we're getting is teachers are working to set up their virtual classroom, and they want to have the materials and supplies that they need to do that. And so they're being very thoughtful about how to do it, and they've got their own kids and then their own environment. But I want to echo the part about the mental health supports, and that whatever was already possibly a stressor for yourself or for your family or for your home condition, that can be magnified in a time like this. In a time like this, whatever we were really, really good at, we're probably going to be better at right now. But the things that we were really bad at, we're going to be worse at right now. And so I worry, one of the things when I said we had two things we needed to get commitments on, the commitments to continue with food and nutrition services. We've served over 200,000 meals now. Feeding San Diego and the food bank are helping us shelf stable food. So we have not just the meals we're providing for kids, we're providing pet food. Those basic needs matter. And when those begin to fall apart and everything that you know to turn to for support isn't there anymore, some of our if people are in therapy, they're doing it by phone, but some are not able to anymore. Many of our families access family support services in nonprofit organizations that are on bare bones staff right now. They're not working, they've closed. So a lot of these infrastructure supports that help our most needy families are starting to disappear, and not because they wanted to, but because they can't. And so when I said commitment to nutrition and a continuity of learning, I can't, you can't leave out that none of that happens by magic. And so we know that there are very big pressures on families for the mental health support. So there also is on our resources page, very concrete tips, who to reach out to. There's things for kids. We have phone lines that kids can call in on if they need to connect. These are the older students that were already having suicidal ideations, that are normally having a hard time managing their life. This could be more challenging for them. So we put front and center all of the supports that we typically have access to. We have school counselors, we have nurses, we have supports. And so in our resources page, you can go to the part on mental health resources and start with yourself. Caring for you, they always say on the airplane, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. But what are you doing for yourself? How have you developed something that works for you? And we have a campaign in San Diego Unified. It's our employee wellness campaign, and it's connected to our health provider. We say what the strong do to rise is they ask for help. And that's not a campaign that started with COVID-19. We launched this several years ago. What it means to live well in our time, live well in San Diego, and as San Diego Unified Employer, as an employer, we've had an employee wellness campaign that is about what the strong do to rise is we ask for help. People should raise their hand right now and go, I'm not okay. I'm not sure what's wrong, but I need help. And our employees know where to go. And our VIBA resource center that we opened for our employees is very active. You can't go physically, but we are actively pushing out content, and we're looking at employee well-being through the lens of physical, mental, emotional. It's about that we're going to be okay. I know the habits and the things that we develop during this time will come out of this, and how we spend this time is we can be better for it.
Yeah, yeah. If I can, Elizabeth, real quick, you mentioned, Cindy, the strengths get accentuated and the weaknesses as well. And I think, unfortunately, our health disparities within our systems also get accentuated as we're hearing more and more about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on African American communities around the country. And I think, along with the African American community and many other underserved communities from a health disparity perspective, I think, that gets escalated, and caring means that we look into it to figure out how do we ensure that we're providing solutions where the impact is occurring as well.
There's just so much hope in our students. What I know about our kids and what I've seen in our children every single day, my 10 years working in City Heights, is the resilience of our young people, the ability for our young people to meet challenges, and we're right there with them. Yes, some things are going to be harder, but we have a whole generation of kids that are ready to meet this challenge. They're digital natives. They grew up in this environment, and I know what our kids are going to produce during this time is going to be amazing. We're going to be blown away by what our children do, and be gentle with ourselves while we do it. I want to be clear. There's a lot of parents on this call. We're not ready to concede this school year. We're not giving up. We're not quitting. And we're not quitting because we're just hard charge going. We're doing it because we're going to do it together. And as a leader, I believe that you always focus on how to protect everybody, how to move forward, and how to do this as a city. And when we come out on the other side of it, the lessons learned and the light and the hope that we're moving towards, we will get there. I can't wait to get back to the graded instruction on April 27th. Those routines start to develop themselves, and what our kids are going to produce, what our teachers are coming up with, is downright inspirational. And I can't wait to see what comes out of this on that part of it.
You are both so uplifting and empowering. Thank you both so much. This was a great way to kick this off. I appreciate you very much. It's time for us to close. I want to thank you, our guests, Cindy Marten and Stephen Jones, for all of the wisdom that you've shared with us today. It's been so helpful. Everyone will be back next week with a conversation about boundaries and schedules, which we touched on today. Schedules, as we've discussed, have shifted so much at home and work, and how do we create that schedule that works for our professional and personal responsibilities and needs? Our guests next week are going to be Robin Toft, President and CEO of Toft Group Executive Search, and Chanel McNutt, a principal consultant at Jones, a colleague of Dr. Jones. Again, thank you all for joining us. And on behalf of Lead San Diego, I wish you and your loved ones well. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Be well.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Take care, everyone. It was an honor.